Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Gerben. So, Rick,
Yes.
you're going to tell me something about load testing. And I did something with load testing, but in the old way with JMeter. But I hope you can tell me something about that it's also now in Azure? Or?
There is Azure Load Testing.
Okay,
and
cool.
You might be in for a surprise as far as the supporting services goes, but let's start by introducing the service in short. So I'm going to dive right into my machine. Here we can see the Azure portal, and we have a Azure Load Testing service available. Now, I did deploy a web application that we could use to load test. So let's first, for a second, dive into Visual Studio, because this is actually a very complicated piece of code, as you can see. It's a minimal API which on the URL/test URL waits for a random period of time and then just returns an OK. So nothing too fancy over there.
So you can simulate load with that random value.
Yeah. And that's actually the reason you can specify in your load test when it's a success. So for instance, you could say, I would like to have it always return within 750 milliseconds in 90% of the time, and it will test that for you based on the tests that you specify.
Okay. So it not only has performance meters, but also you can specify some thresholds on the web.
Yes. So let's dive right into the service itself. So the service is actually called Azure Load Testing, and I created one. And the easiest way of getting a test up and running is go to test and then just create a quick test. And here you can see that it actually just asks a couple of things for you. What's the URL that you would like to go to? How many virtual users do there need to be? What's the duration of the test? And how fast can it ramp up? Okay. So you can even have a ramp up time of like 10, 20, 60 seconds, where it actually builds up to the load that you're expecting, or you just want to hit it right away as soon as it comes in.
Why would you want to use that kind of ramp up? Maybe to have some loading or some hot loading of your application, or what?
Yeah, or maybe even to validate that your to validate that traffic looks like it is in normal life, because there aren't too many web applications that get hit 1,000 times within a second out of the blue. So most of the time your application is built in a way where it actually builds up some cache, or maybe optimizes a bit, and that you need a warm-up for the script. In this case, we'll do ramp-up time of 0 seconds. Now I'm going to go and see if I have my URL available right here under this field right here. So I think it's this one, /test URL. So this is the URL that we're going to. In this case, it has 5 virtual users, 120 seconds. Let's make that 60, because otherwise we'll be working a lot. And now here it says this test will consume 0.08 virtual user hours. Okay. Now, as far as pricing goes, that's where the pricing is of Azure Load Testing. So clicking on the pricing, we can see that you pay 10 euros a month for a resource, which includes 50 virtual user hours. And after that, you pay like 15 cents for an additional virtual user hour. So the more you use the service to do some load testing, the more you pay, of course.
Yeah, you have some base cost, and then on top of that, some virtual. Do you know that virtual users, do they spread it out? I mean, for the application that's getting the traffic, does it look like multiple IP addresses are hitting it, or?
That's actually once we go into the more advanced, we can have a look at that. For now, let's first finalize our quick test. So I can now just click Run Test here, and it automatically starts running. I can do so, but of course I already prepared this a bit. So this one is actually created from from a quick test, and here we can say, if we go to Configure Test, we can actually see what's happening. Now, for those of you who have looked into how we define the quick test, you will see that this now looks a lot different, right? We have basics, we have a test plan, we have parameters, we have load. So what happened under the hood is, based on that quick test that we just created, Azure Load Test has created a JMeter file for us based on what we put in. So we have a test name here, which is not all too complicated, but now we have a JMX here, which is a JMeter file, that actually specifies how this test what this test should look like.
Ah, okay, so you actually get a language or an environment that people who make and specify load tests they know how to use the tool.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a different kind of language or something.
It's completely JMeter based.
Okay, cool.
So even when you do a quick test, it will create that JMeter for you. Now looking at this, we have some parameters. We specify some load. So here we have one instance. And here we have the engine instances, which means this is the number of parallel execution engines. So this is already how many engines are running virtual users hitting your machine. We could have some test traffic mode here, which could be public or private. And then here we have test criteria. By default, there are no. But you could say, I would like to have my response time a maximum less than, let's say, 750, right? So in this case, we specify, I would like all of the responses to have a maximum response time of 750 milliseconds. As soon as this goes over, the test fails.
So this is where you define those thresholds and okay,
yeah.
Cool.
And then we also have some monitoring. We're going to dive into that a little bit later. Now the cool thing is, if we go to JMeter itself, and I open the test that we just saw with the quick test, I downloaded.
It's a GMX file for you.
Yeah, I downloaded that before. So here we have some user-defined variables, which actually says the threads per engine and the ramp-up time and the duration in second. It's all specified here to be gotten from the environment variables. As you can see here, it says system.getEnvironment protocol, for instance. And then under the thread group, you'll have the actual request, and this request says, with the specified protocol, go to the specified server and get the specified path. So it actually generated all of this for us. Yeah. Now that's if you go from a quick test and you look into the details of it. Of course, if you go a little bit into more detail and we go upload a JMeter script, then actually we get that screen that we just saw, where we can...
Maybe for advanced teams who already have load tests.
Yes.
And
or who maybe record their load tests using JMeter, because you can do that as well. So this is where you can actually completely specify what that test should look like. And then one of the things that we built was the Betatalks JMX that actually said, hey, I wanted to do an HTTP request to this URL with this protocol, and would like to go to the path /test URL. Well, the thing is actually the same. However, here I have specified on the thread group the number of threads to be used, so the number of users. So these are 100 different users hitting the machine with a ramp-up period of 305 seconds. I'm not sure why I chose that one, but probably I wanted to have 30, but the 5 was still there, with a loop count of 50. So I ran that one as well. And if we want to go into the details of the test, then we can actually see a test run that we have right here. And you could see that the response time in the 19th percentile of the time was 11 seconds, which is quite high. Now, the problem is we had that delay. So we started out with a thread.sleep, and then you'll get an average response time of 11 seconds in the 19th percentile. Funny thing is, if we go to that same test, but now we have an async with a task.delay, we can see that all of our responses, over 90% of our responses, have 900 milliseconds.
So it's really cool to see that difference. I mean, between async where you can that can handle a lot of calls and one that cannot.
So here's where you see to use async in Web 2. Anyhow, here we can see how the load was distributed, but this was a quick test. Now, if we go into the details of the more complex test, and this is actually where we see that it is a let's say young service in Azure, because for me now there's no way to actually go back to the main screen of the service. So the UI isn't completely up to par yet, but hey, it's a preview service, so we're accepting that for now. Going back to the test, this is the actual test based on the JMeter script. And here we have a run as well. And here you can see that it actually had a duration of 5 minutes and 28 seconds with an average response time in the 19th percentile of 929 milliseconds. Now, it did actually do 60 requests per second, which is quite okay. And you can actually see spike in response time, and that was the point where I thought, well, I still want to do one update to the application. I don't want to stop my test, so I'll just push out a new version while it's running, and that actually, it picked that up. But for now, we're only seeing the testing side of things, right? Now here comes, as far as I'm concerned, the most awesome part of the fact that this is Azure Load Testing, probably load testing Azure components. Because if we do app components, and we select the components that it actually runs against, which is the BT app on the BT plan, and we apply, then instantly we can see how the application and the supporting plan under it actually handled this load.
This is only available for the GMX style templates or also for the quick test?
It's also for the quick test, since in the end it is also a GMX. Yep. So if we go to this one, which was the quick test, we could also go, it was getting enabled, we could also go app components here and say we want to have the BT ones, which were these two, and then going into this run test results, we should get, we didn't have, I didn't have the app components up front, so it didn't apply it to runs that already ran.
Yeah.
So now we are going to see the results of how the application actually handled the load of these Azure load tests.
This is really cool. I mean, now you can really dig into every resource to see how they behave. So
and the cool thing is you could use this to actually simulate load of what your application might be going through as soon as a lot of people start using it. But also you could see, does it handle the scaling? And does the scaling alleviate, for instance, response times in the way we expect it to do? And this might even help you in finding out if adding different types of caching, what the impact will be on how the application behaves.
Yeah, now you can make really like data-driven decisions based on what you see here. Does it have impact or not? And what if I choose another tier or scale things? Yeah, that's nice.
Well, exactly that. And then even the coolest part is there's this compare button here where you can actually compare 5 different runs. So those might be 5 different deployments of your application to actually see, hey, how did this work? What were the implications of the changes we made, and did it become better or didn't it?
Nice. Is there also a way to, for instance, export these kind of results and import them back in JMeter, or?
That's actually a good question. That's one that I haven't tried
the share
out
button.
yet.
I don't know what it's or download stuff.
Yeah, I think the share button is really to
give someone a link.
To see,
okay, that's fine. That's fine.
But potentially with the metrics, we could even. Well, these are the metrics that we are actually seeing here on the screen. So I haven't found that yet. Again, I now have no way of actually going back to the resource.
It's a young service. So
it is, yeah.
Things may get added, but
I do see that there's some diagnostics here, but I'm not really sure if we can export. I don't think so. But this is how Azure Load Testing will help us actually understand what's happening with our services and how different types of changes impact the services and how they run.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool to also see that it's an industry standard like JMeter, and then put it in here and not define their own way, and that people who already use load testing can use it. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think Microsoft did try a couple of times within Azure to define their own way of doing certain things. And then they actually found out that they were punished by the community. So they're not doing that anymore. They're just harvesting the power of services that are out there and building awesome services around it to use it even more. So.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye.